Hi again, everybody. It's JPierce again at _JPierce on Instagram, and I've got another image tutorial for you guys. We got this pretty cool looking woods scene with a path winding down through it, and some some foliage on either side, and it looks a little yellow. We have nice yellow orange tones, and we've got some big trees with these red leaves, and some atmosphere light streaming in from behind. And yeah, we're gonna work on this nature scene here today. And before I go any further, I just want to remind you guys to please like and subscribe my videos, and continue to help me to make these videos, and consider supporting me on my Patreon. There's a link in the description. Yeah, let's go ahead and get started. And today I'm going to show you how to do all of this without using any materials that you have to pay for. I'm going to do this all using free materials. Now, my original image, I'm using RD textures and some other materials, but I'm going to recreate it using only free materials. And the technique I want to focus on is how to create this this path so that it follows, so that our bricks follow this nice winding path through here. So we're going to do that using some textures from 3dtextures.me. And this is a great site, and this guy's really has a lot of good materials up here, and everything is free at 1K resolution, so you can get these all for free at 1K resolution. But if you want to support this guy, that'd be awesome, and then you can download the maps at full res. But we're going to do these with just the free materials. So we're going to use this brick wall 10 as our path, and then we're going to use this one. It's called Stylized Bark 001, and we're going to use that for our trees. And then we're going to use this one. It's called Sand 002. We'll use that for our dirt. So now that all that's out of the way, let's jump into Cinema. And standard setup here, I'm going to use a plane. I like to set my plane at 4000 by 4000 and set the width segments to 200, height segments to 200. And we're going to go in and just start off with a good old sculpting brush. So we're going to break it apart. You can hit C or hit this little icon here. And now we have a plane, and we'll go to hidden line for now. We'll just go. We'll leave it on. We'll leave it on Gerard for now. So I'm going to start off with a pull brush, and we're going to do our path first. So by holding Control, I'm just going to create a nice winding path, and made it like that first one. Maybe something like that is good. So that's cool. And now I'm just going to lift up the edges because I want to have some sort of steep slopes for our trees to live on. So I'm going to increase my pull brush and start lifting up these outer areas and just going over them on either side. You just want to lift them up. And I'm going to take a wax brush and increase the pressure. And go back to pull, increase the pressure, and just lift it up and keep lifting these sides up. So I want them to be pretty steep. I want some nice steep hills on either side to make it feel almost secretive, secluded, a nice kind of a secluded because we'll look at our image again. It's kind of secluded. We have this steep hill and a steep hill. So I think I'm about at the angle that I want my hills to be here. So I'm going to drop in a daylight now and turn it so that I can see what my hills are doing. And I'm going to show you another cool technique to sharpen these out. What I like to do sometimes is take the knife tool, and if I normally just click on the knife tool, I get these gouges, which is pretty cool, but I don't want that. I want the inverse of that. So to do the inverse of that, like every other brush, I just hold Control, and when I do this, I can create these cool looking ridges. But let's increase the size and maybe decrease the pressure a little bit. And if I just go across them with holding Control, I can get some cool looking formations by doing this. And I did this in my original render, and I thought it looked really neat. And then when I've got some cool looking steep ridges, then I can take a pull brush and load up, let's load up maybe this floor pattern 5 and do it, on an angle, pretty light, pretty wide. And I just want to show this to you because it's really cool. We're going to cover most of this with our texture, but it does look really neat. If I come in here, now I have this really awesome looking landscape, and you could do something like this for a much larger scene, where the scale is much bigger, and you'd have a person that's maybe standing right here, or you can create cool cliffs with this. But it's just a cool technique I wanted to just show you really quick. I'm actually going to smooth out this area so it's not too pronounced. And now what I want to do with my path here is I want to take a wax brush, and I just want to make sure that it's nice and flat. And so I'm going to use a wax brush, but I'm going to invert it. I just want it to be very flat. So this way our two textures will mix together better. And I think it's a little sharp, so I'm just going to make it a little wider and a little weaker, and try this again. That's good. So this is a good brush. So nice and flat. Just want to make it nice and flat so that our two textures will mix together better. And you'll see what I'm talking about in a minute. So what do we do now? Well, let's start working with these textures that we downloaded from 3dtextures.me. I have them already set up as presets so that we don't waste a bunch of time. So I have the path, the dirt, and the bark, and I'm going to bring those in. And I also am going to bring in a leaf material. And I highly suggest that when you make materials that you save them as presets, because it saves a ton of time when you're doing these kind of scenes frequently. And the easy way to do that is you just click on the texture that you've created, you hit create, and you say save material preset, and it'll save it into a user library, and you can find it in the content library under presets, user, materials. It'll save them right there. And you can also add these things to a thing called add to favorites, and then you'll find them under when you hit this star up here. It's a great way to save things like materials. I have my HDR in here, and I have my I have a few preset C4D objects that I've created. I have a fog volume, a setup for plants, and so on. And anything that you use frequently, I highly recommend creating your own presets for, because it's a real time saver for sure. So now, next thing we're going to do, let's get the live viewer up and running, and we have a bunch of white looking nonsense happening. So maybe we just bring our light around here somewhere. And another preset that I always save is my image aspect ratio. So I like to set that up at 1080 by 1350 for now. And then I'm going to press Shift V to pull up the viewport options, go to View, and set this view opacity tinted border to 80 so that I get black bars, and then I can see in my image where it's going to be. So good looking setup right here. Let's start with our dirt. So here's our dirt from 3dtextures.me, and I'll show it to you in the node editor. All I have in here is the color, the normal, and the displacement, and I have the normal set down pretty low in the power channel. And let's see if we can get this to look okay. So we'll apply this to our plane, and out of the gate it's not terrible, but let's see if we can tweak it some. It looks like our specular is okay, our roughness is okay, so that looks okay. Let's change our tiling, go up to 4x4. That's okay. It doesn't look that bad. We're going to cover a lot of this with plants, so it's just going to be in areas where it's peeking through. So that actually looks pretty good. It's maybe a bit high, so we'll take it down to 40. That's pretty good. So now I want to backtrack here because I should have done this first, but we need to create our path. And so now that we've got our dirt in here, we're going to create our path, and we're going to do this by enabling the snap function, disabling vertex snap, and then enabling polygon snap. And now I'm going to go up here and get the sketch tool, and I'm going to follow along our path here. I'm just going to draw right here in the viewport where we want our path to be. And nice and slow. And now it's drawn a spline directly onto our, mapped right onto our surface of our geometry. And I sort of messed that up here a little bit because it should be here. So let's try again. And this time I'm gonna turn off textures so I can see a little better. And I think I'm gonna, yeah, this is fine. I can, you know, you want to be able to see what you're doing. So okay, here we go. Attempt number 2. That was pretty squiggly. That one was bad, guys. Come on. Okay, here we go. And you know, if I used a Wacom, this would be easier. But I make no apologies for my choice of using a mouse. I'm just comfortable with it. There we go. So that looks pretty good. So now we've got our path, and it's drawn just about right on the surface of where our geometry is. So that's cool. So that looks great. And let's take a sweep now. So we'll use a sweep, and I like to use actually a circle for this. I'm going to drop circle and the spline inside the sweep, and the spline needs to be second, the circle needs to be first. And then I'm going to change it to an ellipse. The circle, change it to an ellipse, and reduce the Y radius. And by using a circle, I feel like you get it'll fall off into these edges and help to blend it in a little bit better than if I used a square or some other shape to do the sweep. So there we go. And now all I have to do is I'll show you the texture setup for our path. And this kind of looks complicated, but it's really not. I just have the color, the normal, and the displacement. And I have the displacement right now set to 5, and I have the normal turned down pretty low. And then I'm just using a multiply node to multiply in an RGB spectrum, which is a very faint tan color. Just a very faint tan color to add a little bit of brown to it. And then I have a color correction node, and I'm tweaking the gamma to make it a bit darker. So let's apply this material, and what you'll see is, bang, right off the bat, it follows along, right along with our spline. It's beautiful, except that it's not, and it looks wrong. So we can fix that though, very easily just by adjusting the tiles. Let's see, do I want this side? No, I want that there, and maybe we'll go 3 there. Alright, so now we've got our path, and it's starting to look like maybe something. Again, you know, these are free textures. You can get, if you can afford the ones that are higher res, it's just going to improve your render, but we can totally make this work. We're totally going to get a usable looking image out of this. And I think I want to just move my path a little bit, so I can go to my sweep and change the under the basic tab, change it to X-ray so that I can see inside. And then I'm going to select my spline and go to point mode. And now, just with the move tool, I can select the points, slide this one over a little, slide it down some. Uh-oh, we're having an issue. See, when I move this point, it starts freaking out. So you can fix that just by turning off banking, and now it's just going to sweep in a totally parallel direction, because this will make it follow it'll make it follow the y-axis of the spline as well. But if I turn off the banking, it'll just it'll stick in one spot. So that's it. It's an easy fix for that. And let's see, where's our other points here? Let me bring a camera in and save that vantage point. And let's see, where's our spline? Where's our spline points? Let's turn off snapping. Sometimes you can't even find these things. Let me go to my plane. I'll turn the plane on X-ray. Go back to our spline. There we go. Now I can see them. And just push this one down. Push it over. Push this one down. And now you can look over here and see what it's doing. You want to just follow it nicely. You know, the sketch tool is a good start, but sometimes you have to tweak it. So, following the yellow brick road. Look, we got a little brick road now. I think it has too many tiles, so we'll go ahead and go 0.5 by 1.5. And maybe that's a bit much, so you can just tweak these values manually, just visually, until we get something about what we'd like. Alright, now let's see how much we can push this displacement, because I want to see. There we go. Okay. Pushing those bricks out, and now I can adjust the mid-level to sit it back down. And I can even just take my spline and try and get it down in. And maybe we can flatten our circle even more. Maybe down to just 8 or so. Because I'd like to get some of this soil interacting with the bricks, and there we go. That looks pretty good right there. So now we've got some soil interacting with our bricks. Let's go back to where our camera was, and zoom out some, reposition. come out a little more. But that's the basic principle, you guys. We now have a material following along the path of this spline, and we got this cool looking path and some dirt stuff. And we'll go ahead and tweak this material a little bit more. Let's look at our specular. It's probably too high. And maybe we need a little more roughness too. I think right there is okay. And yeah, right in here is okay. So pretty cool. All right, so free textures, getting them to work, looks pretty cool. So I hope you guys will be able to download these textures and work with them like I did in this image. So that's great. Let's get some plants going. So we'll go ahead and we're going to be using the Forester plugin as always. So I'm just going to add a multiflora, and the first one I want to use, I want to turn off change materials, and the first one I want to use is probably this poa grass. Love this poa grass, and I'm going to apply my greenery to it. And I have this one set up a bit different. I have a leaf texture that is default from the Forester plugin. And then I have a color correction, and I'm doing the same thing I did on our bricks, where I'm multiplying in a color. Right now the color is just green, but we're going to use this to create our orange foliage and our red leaves. So we'll start with this, and we'll go to Octane, we'll go to Plugins, Octane, Scatter. Put the poa grass inside the scatter, and then set the scatter surface to the plane. And instead of using vertex, we're going to use surface, and we'll set the count up to somewhere around 20,000. Maybe too many, maybe just 10,000. And these are actually a little small, so maybe we'll go up to 2. And we probably don't need that many. Maybe just 5,000. Now I want to clip everything down below here, so I'm going to add a MoGraph effector, the plane effector, and if you guys are out there using R20 or R21, this is going to be different because they changed the way these fall-offs are. So if you know how to do this in R20 or R21, I don't even know if R21's out yet, but regardless, they changed the fall-off to fields. So there should be a field called a linear field. So I'm going to set the parameters on this plane effector to -1. You'll still have access to the plane effector. It's just the fall-off that they changed. So, but here in R19, I'm setting this to linear and Y+, and the size to 5. And then I'll apply it to my scatter. And now, wherever I put this plane effector is where my plants are going to be clipped. And so there we go. Nicely reveal where our path is. Beautiful. Now we need to add some randomness. So MoGraph effector, random, and make sure it's applied. And for our random parameters, we want scale, uniform scale, 0.5, rotation, H rotation, 900. Cool. And now let's vary up these plants some. So duplicate my POA. And I want to change one of them to, let's go with leaf grass. Cool. Too big. Scale it down some. see, 1.2. Cool. And let's make our plane a little wider. We'll go to the fall off tab and change this to 20. That'll give us some more room to play. Cool. And there's probably too many here. 3,000. That's cool. And now one more. We'll use, let's see, maybe we'll just try a wild grass patch. I think I went too low. 4,000. Cool. Alright, nice greenery set up around here. And now what I want to do is I actually want to add some grass on top of here, but very sparsely. So I'm going to duplicate my scatter one more time and delete everything except I'll leave the wild grass in there. And then I want to also delete the plane effector. So now I have grass covering my path. And what I'm going to do for this, I'm going to scale it down. And then I'm going to go into the grass settings, and under the grass tab I'm going to increase this grass patch radius. And so if you watch here, what you can see is it's going to start spreading out. So there we go. And now when you do that, when you increase this radius, it's going to kind of look very mechanical looking. But if you change this grass node offset, it will help to spread it out a little more evenly. And we don't need so many, maybe only 1,000. Great. So now we have some grass sort of growing through the bricks a little bit. And let's get this color set up right. So I want my ground cover to be sort of an orange. So by using this multiply node, I can just go ahead and select the color I want, probably something in here, and you can see it changed already. And let's see. Now if I change this color correction input here, if I turn off the saturation, it's going to get rid of all the green, and it's only going to use this yellow. So let's saturate it. Cool. And now I want to add also a color correction node just to the albedo and turn down the gamma some to help brighten it up. And I'm going to need to pull up the saturation too. Now I can see that it's too green looking, and we need to go more in the red direction. Very neat. So now we get this nice looking sort of soft orange, yellow, almost dying looking grass, but by keeping the saturation, you know, it looks almost fantastical, you know, like some kind of a fantasy world, which is definitely a look I'm going for. So, so that looks pretty nice right there. I think I'm happy with that, at least for the purposes of, you know, just explaining to you guys. You know, you can dial this in. But, you know, as far as explaining it to you guys, that's the basic technique for how you get some colored greenery. And we'll move our light around some more. And I'm going to duplicate our original scatter. Now we're going to add our trees in. And so I'm going to go to Plugin, Forester, Tree. And the tree I would like to use, I think, for this one, I think I used this one, Prunus tree. So I think the only modification I made to this tree was to increase the trunk height just up quite a bit, somewhere in that range, and then maybe randomize this tree seed and set the viewport levels to match the render levels. Great. And now let's get our bark working. So here's our bark material. Again, I'm only using the color, the normal, and the displacement. So in the normal, I have that set to the default, and the displacement right now it's just at 10. 2K is too low, so I know this texture is 1024, so we'll use 1024. And I don't want to apply this to the branches because that's gonna, not only is it gonna look really weird, it's gonna really increase. It's really gonna slow down the machine. So I'm only going to apply this material to the trunk. So there's a trunk selection, and then there's a branches selection, and then there's a leaf selection. And so just working with the trunk for now. I think at this point I'm going to do a save. And let's see. Let's go in and take a look at it. So here's our trunk material from 3dtextures.me, and I think this one looks pretty nice. You know, it's stylized. It has an illustrative quality to it, but I think it looks, you know, especially with the power of Octane, it looks really nice. So and the tiling looks good, and the displacement level looks pretty good. And let's see, let's check our specular. Specular's down here, roughness is up here. So that looks good. I'm happy with that. And I want my branches to match. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to split out this material, and I'll label it branch. And then I'm going to edit it and delete the displacement. So now I have a non-displaced version of our same bark, and I'll apply that to the branches. So that now, once it updates, so that now we have our branches matching our trunk and looking nice, looking very nice. And we're going to do the same thing with our leaf material. And now that I'm done with these, I can get rid of the default materials that came with this forester tree. And I'm going to apply my duplicate to my leaf and go into our texture again and go get red. Bang. Beautiful color combination of the yellow and the red. And cool. So let's go back to our camera. And let's see. I don't like this little thing up here. The trunk is too wide at the top, and that's being caused by our displacement. So make sure our mid-level is set to 0.5. And now we'll drop our tree inside to inside of our scatter. And oh my god, there's way too many. Let's go 50. And we'll turn the normal align down. We don't want it down all the way. I'd like to have some angle to it. So here should be okay. And my viewport is not happy. It's very slow. It's very slow. Happens with, especially when I'm doing screen recording. So, cool, looking cool. I think our tree's a little too big, so we'll scale it down some. .85 should do it okay. And what I'm seeing here is that it's sort of sticking out of the ground a little bit, and I'm just going to fix that by going into the position drop down in our scatter options and just changing the Y position to something like -10, and that'll help just tuck it right into our terrain. And I think there's probably too many of these still. We'll go to 35. So that's better. And we'll start playing with the seed. Wonderful. So we're getting some nice looking seeds here. I think I like that one. It was 99, 98 maybe. Good. Yes, I actually really like that. We'll stick with that for now. And I'm going to duplicate the scatter and add some more foliage to our undergrowth, above ground undergrowth. We're going to use this albizia tree. And we'll go to the tree parameters and set the viewport levels to 4. And then we'll scale it down. Now we want to change the seeds so they're not right on top of our other trees. This just helps to fill out our forest. And some of these have a pretty nice look. That has a pretty nice look to it. Great. I'm going to do a save. Now I'm just going to add some more trees in the background. And to do that, we're just going to jump into 4 views. And just give Octane a second to catch its breath, because it really has a problem with that sometimes. Okay, we seem to be okay. So just have to be careful and use autosave and save often, because Octane, as wonderful as it is, it you know, it can get very unhappy sometimes. So I'm just going to use a landscape and drag it back here, and I'm going to scale it up. Now if you remember, I set my plane to X-ray, so I'll turn that off so that I can see where it is here. And I'll shrink it and grow it this way, and then bigger. We want to position it back here somewhere. And now I'm just going to duplicate this scatter, and I'm going to duplicate the albizia into the scatter, because I don't have a need to use 2 scatters for my background trees. But first I'll apply the dirt again, our dirt material. and waiting for you to update. There we go. And we'll go maybe 8 by 8 on the tiles. That'll work fine. Maybe pretty far in the background. Just don't want to make sure that there's no weird white untextured polygons showing up in my render. So we'll take the scatter and apply our background landscape. And back here in our background landscape, we want this to have quite a few more clones on it. So we'll try something in the range of 100. And not seeing it back there. Oh no, we are. There's just not very many. So 300. Okay, 500. And then we'll just maybe position it down here a little bit better. That's great. We just want a nice background fill. Oh, and what's happening is we want to make sure that this plane effector is not present in our background landscape. Otherwise, it's going to cut out a lot of our clones. That's why I had to go so high. So, yeah, I think 500 is okay. And for whatever reason, probably because of my screen recording, it's not very happy. But this is not really a very heavy scene, despite having so many clones in here. I think there's too many now. 300 should be okay. So despite having a lot of cloned plants and cloned trees, this really isn't a heavy scene. So you know, you don't need a really crazy computer to do all this. I'm going to do some color correction on our tree bark material. So I'm just going to take a color correction into the diffuse channel and take the gamma down to around 0.8, 0.7. And we'll do the same thing to the branches. And frustrating as it is, I can still see right here that it's kind of sticking out in a weird way. So I'm going to try one more time with our scatter. We'll go down to -20 in the position, and perhaps that's just the nature of the beast over there. But let's see, -40. Okay, that looks a little better now. So now it's not sticking, jutting out there in a weird way that's giving us an unusual looking artifact. So free textures, you guys. It's all coming together. Next, we'll just add a fog volume. And we'll start with the fog volume by setting the voxel size to 900, and we'll use a size of 6,000 by 6,000 by 6,000. And then we'll just position it back here just a bit and turn it off in our viewport. Then we'll go to the medium tab and click on the volume medium, set our absorption to white, set our scattering to white, and I may actually want this to be blue later. but we'll switch over to path tracing now. And we're going to turn up the scattering and turn up the volume step length. And since I switched to path tracing, I just want to make sure that my samples aren't too high. And my GI clamp is set to 4. Because if your samples are too high in here, it's just going to keep rendering and rendering and rendering, and it's going to slow down your workflow. So sometimes, you know, it'll actually finish completing, you know, all 350 samples pretty quickly. But if you have 16,000 samples, it's just going to render and render and render. So back to our volume medium. We'll bring down the density. And now we're getting some pretty great looking fog. And I may just want to add a little bit of blue into the scattering channel. And sometimes it doesn't do exactly what you think it's going to do. But there you go. That is pretty much it, you know. Now, I think I have my light a little bit higher. And that fog is looking pretty sweet, you guys. So I'm just going to add a little fill light in our foreground. And I'm going to rotate it. And drag it just over here. I want some nice side fill on these front trees. That's pretty harsh. So you just want to tweak these things and just bring in a little bit of extra light in the foreground. And I think what's happening is I'm just going to tweak this bark again and decrease the roughness some and give myself a little bit more specular so I can see what's happening with my light source. So I'm going to take my light and I'm going to go ahead and tweak it towards yellow. And I think I'm going to desaturate this bark too. There we go. Do the same thing to the branches. That looks a bit more natural. So now we have this really awesome looking scene. And you know, you can go in and tweak these volume settings. Maybe we don't want this fog to be quite so thick. And maybe we want it even a bit more blue. And there we go. Now we're getting some nice blue. And we'll go more on scattering and a little bit thicker. And the more you play with this stuff, you know, the more comfortable you'll get with these settings, because the fog volume can be pretty tricky to get a handle on. But once you do, you can get it to look you can get some really cool looks out of it. So if I'm really back behind the trees, I'm getting a nice hard silhouette here. And let's see what's happening with our light here. Wasn't happy with this. Okay, so now the light, I'm just adjusting it. I've widened it and just moved it around to some different areas, and it's probably just a little too bright, but I'm getting a nice looking highlight on the side of this tree and on the side of this tree and just a little bit right here, and that's what I wanted to see so that I could get some good definition on these trees. So awesome, you guys. This is pretty much it. Let's take a look at our source image. You know, not far off, I'd say, at all. Just with a little bit more tweaking here and there, you can get these trees looking just like my trees, and you can add some more fog in post effects if you like. But really a very cool looking image. Not a lot of really technically very hard things to pick up, but I hope you learned at least how to get this path to follow along the ground here. And yeah, so looking pretty cool. Maybe we just want some more branches on this tree. Something like that. You can tweak, you can fool around, you can try different trees, you can try different materials. There's a lot of options with this stuff, and that's why it's so much fun. So I hope you guys learned something from this, and I hope you guys have a lot of fun working with this scene. And please remember to like and subscribe my videos, and consider becoming a patron on my Patreon account, so that I can continue to do these YouTube tutorials and create my art and post it to my Instagram @_JPierce. And happy rendering.